Hey there, it's Karenology. This level of audacity is off the charts. You have to hear this.
Rays of the setting sun glinted off the hood of my car as I parked it in the driveway. After a grueling day at work, all I wanted was to kick off my shoes, enjoy a quiet evening, and maybe catch up on some much-needed relaxation. But as I stepped out of the car, something unusual caught my eye. A freshly planted sign at the edge of my driveway. It read in bold letters, "Future Public Road. Construction starting soon." I froze, my pulse quickening. My driveway, a public road? This had to be a mistake. I marched up to the sign, inspecting it more closely. Beneath the bold letters was a smaller note, "By order of the Maplewood Homeowner Association." Anger flared within me. I had owned this property for years. It was private land, unquestionably part of my deed. What right did they have to turn it into a public road? Before I could process further, my neighbor Karen, always nosy and somehow always involved in the homeowner association's decisions, appeared on the sidewalk. Her arms were crossed, and she had that trademark smirk plastered across her face. "Oh, hi, Ryan," she chirped, feigning sweetness. "I see you've noticed the new project. Isn't it exciting? A new road will really improve the neighborhood's connectivity." "Exciting?" I snapped. "This is my driveway, Karen. It's private property. They can't just take it." Karen's smirk didn't waver. "Oh, it's all been approved by the homeowner association, for the greater good. I'm sure you'll come to see how beneficial it is." She sauntered off before I could reply, leaving me seething. That evening, I pored over my property documents. There it was in black and white. The driveway was undeniably part of my land. Yet the homeowner association had posted that sign without so much as consulting me. This wasn't just an overreach. It was a blatant violation of my rights. The next morning, I stormed into the homeowner association's office. The president, Lorraine Fletcher, greeted me with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ryan, what a pleasant surprise," she said, folding her hands neatly on the desk. "What can I do for you?" "You can start by explaining this," I said, slamming a photo of the sign onto her desk. "Since when does the homeowner association have the authority to turn private driveways into public roads?" Lorraine glanced at the photo, unfazed. "Ah, yes, the new road project. It's a community improvement initiative. Completely legal, I assure you." "Legal?" I echoed, incredulous. "That's my property. You can't just decide to take it." Her smile faltered slightly. "Ryan, these decisions are made collectively. The board voted on it. And as a member of this community, we all have to make sacrifices for the greater good." "Sacrifices?" I said, my voice rising. "That's not a sacrifice, that's theft." Lorraine's eyes hardened. "I suggest you calm down, Ryan. If you have a grievance, you can file it through the proper channels." The proper channels turned out to be an endless maze of bureaucratic red tape. Emails went unanswered. Phone calls were redirected. And then, one morning, the real escalation began. Construction equipment appeared at the edge of my driveway. I rushed outside, standing between the machinery and my property. "You're not breaking ground here," I said, my voice firm. The foreman shrugged. "We have orders from the homeowner association. If you've got a problem, take it up with them." "I have," I said, "and I'm telling you, this is illegal." By now, a crowd had gathered. Karen was there, of course, whispering to Lorraine, who had arrived in her pristine sedan. They both watched with smug satisfaction as the foreman argued with me. The tension mounted until the police were called. The officers listened to both sides, but their hands were tied. "This sounds like a civil dispute," one officer said. "You'll need to take it to court." As the machinery rumbled to life, I felt a wave of helplessness. But it didn't last long. I wasn't about to let them trample over my rights, literally. That evening, I contacted an attorney, gathering every piece of documentation I had to prove my ownership. If they wanted a fight, I would give them one. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. The homeowner association, with Karen as their cheerleader, had far more insidious plans than I could have imagined. And I was about to uncover just how far they were willing to go to push me out. The weeks that followed felt like a blur of escalating tensions and sleepless nights. Every day brought a new challenge and a new affront from the homeowner association. My attorney, Sarah Langston, was sharp and relentless, but even she was taken aback by the sheer audacity of their actions. "They're trying to wear you down, Ryan," she said during one of our late-night strategy calls. "It's a classic tactic. They're hoping you'll give up. Well, they're in for a disappointment, I replied, though the exhaustion in my voice betrayed me. The construction equipment returned, this time with more crew members and heavier machinery. Lorraine Fletcher stood at the forefront, clipboard in hand, barking orders like a military general. I confronted her again, but it was like talking to a brick wall. "This project will proceed," she declared, her tone dripping with finality. "The board's decision is final. You're only delaying the inevitable." Sarah had advised me not to engage directly, but it was impossible to stand by and watch them tear into my property. I recorded everything, from the bulldozers inching closer to my driveway, to Karen's triumphant commentary, to the neighbors gathered on the sidewalk. "He's so dramatic," Karen said loudly, ensuring her voice carried, always playing the victim. That night, my security cameras captured footage of something far more sinister. Under the cover of darkness, two figures crept onto my property and vandalized my garden. They tore up plants, smashed flower pots, and left a spray-painted message on my garage door. "Stop fighting progress." When I showed the footage to the police, they filed a report but made no promises. "Hard to prove who's behind this," the officer said with a shrug, "but we'll keep it on file." Sarah, however, was livid. "This isn't just about your driveway anymore," she said. "They're trying to intimidate you into submission. We need to hit back, and hard." She filed an injunction to halt construction immediately, citing the footage and the homeowner association's overreach. For a moment, it felt like a small victory. The court granted a temporary stop work order, and the construction crews were forced to leave. But the reprieve was short-lived. A week later, I received an official letter from the homeowner association. It accused me of disruptive behavior and claimed I was violating community standards by refusing to cooperate. They slapped me with a $5,000 fine and threatened additional penalties if I didn't comply with their demands. It was clear now that this wasn't just about a road. Lorraine and her cronies wanted me out of the neighborhood entirely. They saw me as a thorn in their side, someone who wouldn't fall in line with their vision of Maplewood, and Karen's smug grin every time we crossed paths only fueled my determination. "You should consider selling, Ryan," she said one morning as I retrieved my mail. "This neighborhood's evolving, and maybe it's just not the right fit for you anymore." "You mean it's not the right fit for you if I stay?" I shot back. "But don't hold your breath. I'm not going anywhere." Karen's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Suit yourself," she said, striding away. The next escalation came in the form of a sudden visit from city inspectors. They claimed to have received an anonymous tip about code violations on my property. The inspectors combed through every inch of my home and yard, searching for anything they could cite. In the end, they found nothing significant, but the disruption was enough to add to my mounting stress. "This is coordinated," Sarah said when I told her about the inspection. "They're using every tool at their disposal to break you, but we're not going to let them." As Sarah prepared a lawsuit against the homeowner association for harassment and trespassing, I focused on rallying support from my neighbors. Not everyone was on Lorraine's side, and a few brave souls began to speak out against the overreach. One evening, a group of us gathered in my living room to discuss our options. There was Lisa, a young mother whose backyard had been encroached upon by a similar project. Tom, an elderly retiree, shared stories of how the homeowner association had fined him repeatedly for trivial infractions. And Maria, a new resident, admitted she was too afraid to speak out publicly, but wanted to help in any way she could. "We can't let them keep doing this," Lisa said, her voice trembling with emotion. "If we don't stand up now, they'll just keep taking more." Their stories strengthened my resolve. Together, we began gathering signatures for a petition to challenge the homeowner association's authority. It was risky, but we had little left to lose. Meanwhile, Sarah uncovered something startling: discrepancies in the homeowner association's financial records. Funds allocated for the road project didn't add up, and there were unexplained payments to contractors with ties to Lorraine. "This is the leverage we need," Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with determination. "If we can prove fraud, we can dismantle their whole operation." The stakes were higher than ever, and I knew the fight was far from over. The homeowner association wasn't going to back down without a fight, but neither was I. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. We had a chance to expose the corruption and take back control of our community, and I was ready to see it through to the end. The morning after Sarah uncovered the financial discrepancies, I woke up to the sound of hammering. Peering out of my window, I was met with a sight that made my blood boil. Construction workers had returned to my driveway. This time, They weren't just digging, they were laying down asphalt. I threw on a jacket and stormed outside. "Stop! This is private property!" I shouted, but the workers barely glanced at me. One of them muttered something about orders from the association. Before I could press further, Lorraine Fletcher's car pulled up. She stepped out, her ever-present clipboard in hand, and approached me with an air of smug authority. "Ryan," she said as though scolding a misbehaving child, "we're well within our rights to proceed. The stop work order expired yesterday, and we have no intention of renewing it." "This isn't over," I shot back. "You're trespassing and you know it. I've got an attorney and we're going to make sure this stops." She raised an eyebrow. "I'd be careful if I were you. Legal battles can get very expensive. Are you sure you're prepared for that?" Her thinly veiled threat only strengthened my resolve. I began recording the scene on my phone, documenting every action the workers took. Lorraine noticed and walked off, muttering something under her breath. I didn't care. This was evidence. By midday, Sarah had filed for another injunction, and I managed to get the sheriff's office involved. Deputies arrived and ordered the construction to halt until the legal status of the driveway could be clarified. It was a temporary victory, but I knew it wouldn't be the last. That evening, my house was egged. The sound of the shells cracking against my windows and walls jolted me from my seat. By the time I got outside, whoever had done it was gone, but the message was clear. This was intimidation, plain and simple. I called Sarah to update her, and her voice was calm but firm. "They're escalating because they know they're losing control. Stay strong, Ryan. We'll hit them where it hurts." Her words were prophetic. The next day, Sarah submitted a formal complaint to the county's ethics board, presenting the financial discrepancies she'd found. Within days, an investigation was launched into the homeowner association's finances. Local news outlets picked up the story, and suddenly, Maplewood wasn't just a quiet suburban neighborhood anymore. It was the center of a growing scandal. Reporters began knocking on my door, eager for interviews. At first I hesitated, worried about how the attention might backfire, but Sarah encouraged me to speak out. "The more public this becomes, the harder it will be for them to silence you," she said. So I did. Standing on my front porch, I spoke to cameras about the homeowner association's overreach, the illegal construction on my property, and the harassment I'd endured. Karen's face appeared briefly in one of the news clips, her expression a mixture of shock and fury. The fallout was immediate. Members of the community who had been too afraid to speak out started coming forward with their own stories. One neighbor revealed how Lorraine had pressured him into selling a portion of his yard for a community project that never materialized. Another shared how they'd been fined thousands of dollars for arbitrary rule violations. As the investigation into the homeowner association gained momentum, the atmosphere in the neighborhood grew increasingly tense. Karen stopped making her smug comments, and Lorraine was noticeably absent from public view. Rumors swirled about her involvement in embezzlement, and I couldn't help but wonder if she was finally feeling the heat. But the homeowner association wasn't done fighting. One evening I returned home to find an official-looking notice taped to my door. It was from the homeowner association, claiming I was in violation of a new rule prohibiting excessive media exposure. They fined me $10,000, citing my interviews with the press. Sarah laughed when I showed her the notice. "They're grasping at straws. This isn't enforceable, and it'll only make them look worse." She was right. The fine became yet another piece of evidence in our growing case against them. And then we caught the break we needed. One of the contractors who had worked on the illegal construction came forward, offering to testify about under-the-table payments from the homeowner association. His testimony linked directly to Lorraine and exposed a network of fraudulent transactions. Armed with this new information, Sarah filed a lawsuit against the homeowner association for harassment, fraud, and illegal trespassing. The case attracted even more media attention, and public opinion began to turn decisively against them. Residents who had previously been silent started demanding Lorraine's resignation and a complete overhaul of the association's leadership. In the midst of all this, Karen made one last desperate attempt to regain control. She organized a meeting at her house, inviting a select group of neighbors to discuss restoring harmony in the community. I wasn't invited, of course, but one of the attendees secretly recorded the conversation and sent it to me. In the recording, Karen and Lorraine plotted to discredit me by spreading false rumors about my finances and personal life. It was a vile, underhanded strategy, but it backfired spectacularly. When the recording leaked to the press, it only solidified the public's outrage. The pressure became too much for Lorraine. A week later, she announced her resignation as president of the Homeowner Association. Karen, ever loyal to her friend, also stepped down from her unofficial role as the neighborhood's self-appointed enforcer. But the battle wasn't over. The lawsuit was still ongoing, and the damage they'd done to my property and reputation couldn't be undone overnight. Still, for the first time in months, I felt like I was winning. The tide had turned, and the truth was finally coming to light. With Lorraine Fletcher's resignation and Karen stepping out of the spotlight, a quiet tension settled over Maplewood. But I knew better than to think the fight was over. The lawsuit Sarah had filed against the Homeowner Association was still in full swing, and their legal team was pulling out every trick to delay the proceedings. Meanwhile, the investigation into the association's financial dealings was unearthing even more shocking revelations. One afternoon, Sarah called me with an update. "You're going to want to sit down for this," she began. "The auditors found over $200,000 in unaccounted funds. It looks like Lorraine wasn't just mismanaging the association. She was funneling money into personal accounts." I let out a low whistle. "Do they have enough to press charges?" "It's looking that way," Sarah replied. "But here's the kicker. They've linked some of those payments to Karen. It seems she wasn't just a cheerleader. She was benefiting financially from the association's corruption." The news was both infuriating and vindicating. For months I had endured their harassment, their attempts to undermine me at every turn. Now the evidence was piling up against them, and the tables were finally turning. But the Homeowner Association wasn't going down without a fight. One evening, as I was reviewing documents for the case, I heard a loud knock at my door. Opening it, I found two men in suits standing on my porch. "Mr. Well," one of them said, flashing a badge, "I'm Detective Harper, and this is my partner, Detective Lane. We're here regarding a report filed by the Homeowner Association." My stomach tightened. "What kind of report?" "They're accusing you of tampering with association property and making threats against board members," Harper said, his tone neutral but firm. "That's ridiculous," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I haven't touched their property, and I certainly haven't made any threats." Lane spoke up. "We'll need to ask you some questions and take a look around. Do you consent to a search?" My first instinct was to refuse, but Sarah's advice echoed in my mind. "Stay calm and cooperate. The more transparent you are, the better it will look in court." "Fine," I said, stepping aside. The detectives conducted a brief search, taking notes and asking questions. It was clear the Homeowner Association was trying to paint me as the aggressor, but I had nothing to hide. When they left, I immediately called Sarah to inform her of the incident. "They're getting desperate," she said. "This is another intimidation tactic. We'll document everything and use it to show the pattern of harassment." In the weeks that followed, the case against the Homeowner Association gained national attention. News outlets picked up the story of a small-town association's corruption and the homeowners who had finally stood up to fight back. More residents came forward with their own stories, adding to the growing list of grievances. Then the moment we had been waiting for arrived. The trial date was set, and the courtroom was packed on the first day of proceedings. Sarah presented our case with precision, laying out the evidence of fraud, harassment, and illegal activities perpetrated by the Homeowner Association. The testimony from the whistleblowing contractor was a pivotal moment, and when the auditors detailed the financial discrepancies, the room buzzed with shock. Lorraine took the stand, her composure cracking under cross-examination. Sarah's questions were relentless, peeling back the layers of her deceit. "Isn't it true that you authorized payments to a contractor who was not licensed to perform work in this county?" Sarah asked. Lorraine hesitated, her gaze darting to her attorney. I was under the impression they were properly licensed." Sarah didn't let up. "And yet the payments were made directly to an account tied to your personal business. Care to explain that?" The courtroom fell silent as Lorraine stumbled over her words. It was clear she had no defense. Karen, too, was called to testify. Her arrogance was gone, replaced by a nervous energy as she tried to downplay her involvement. But the evidence spoke for itself. Bank records, emails, and recorded conversations painted a damning picture of her complicity. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the verdict was delivered. The court ruled in our favor, ordering the Homeowner Association to pay substantial damages and dissolve its current leadership structure. Lorraine and Karen faced criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement, and the residents of Maplewood were finally free from their oppressive reign. Standing on my driveway, now free of construction equipment and absurd signs, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The fight had been long and exhausting, but it was worth it. My neighbors and I had reclaimed our community, proving that even against powerful adversaries, justice could prevail. As I looked around at the gathered neighbors, Lisa, Tom, Maria, and so many others who had joined the fight, I realized we had done more than win a legal battle. We had built a stronger, united community, one that wouldn't let corruption take root again. And as for Karen and Lorraine, the last I heard, they were both facing significant prison time. It was a fitting end for those who had tried to trample over the rights of others. For the first time in months, Maplewood felt like home again.